Hi everyone. In the second lecture series, I want to talk a little bit about the subject of consciousness. In your readings, you're going to be reading a chapter on consciousness, so I want to just add a little bit about the terminology, how we use consciousness in our work, and how we study specific areas in the world of consciousness, including daydreaming, sleeping, and of course the use of drugs. So let me just kind of start and go back and kind of follow in with your readings and define consciousness for you. Now, consciousness is a big word. It's not a specific discipline in psychology. It's rather an umbrella of many different topics that all of us in all the different fields need to know. For an example, in my field, in clinical psychology, we need to understand how consciousness works and all the components of consciousness to understand disorders like dissociative disorders, like Split. You've heard of that movie Split. So I just want to kind of give you just a basic definition of consciousness and what that consists of. So when you look at consciousness, to kind of give it a street name, it's called mental processes. Now, if you remember from your definition of psychology, psychology is a scientific study of human-animal behavior and mental processes. So in order just to kind of lump mental processes into a word, we take the word consciousness. Now, when you look at that word consciousness, what does it really consist of? Well, consciousness consists of sensations and perception. Now, you have a chapter on that. I skipped chapter 4 because I knew I was going to talk about in consciousness. So you think about all the information, in your mental processes that is sensation, all that information coming into your brain. Your brain has to figure out what that is. It has to translate that information, and through perception, it comes back out. So we study the world of information processing, and within information processing, we try to look at how everyone's mental processes work with that information from the outside world. What comes in, what comes out. I mean, we've done this. How many of you have looked at something and thought it was a certain object, and then when you got up close, it wasn't anything to what you thought it was? So that tells you that your brain is constantly and consistently trying to interpret the outside world and information through those two processes, sensation and perception. Consciousness also consists of memories. So all the things that have happened to you have been encoded into that memory of yours. We have a process in our brain called the hippocampus that helps us to form those memories. And then those memories have to go where they need to go within each area of the brain. You have that seat of your emotions, so you can understand that a lot of memories may be emotional in content. And then of course you have the thinking part, the academic part, which you look at your cerebral part of your brain. So consciousness consists of all those memories that your brain is trying to interpret every single day. I mean, every day that you walk out the door, your brain is looking at new information and is trying through sensation and perception to try to understand that information and put it where it needs to go within your brain. But consciousness also consists of feelings. We are a very emotional creature. And so when we have all these feelings, it's our mental processes trying to make sense through that area of feelings and throwing in even motivation. There's an entire chapter that we're going to talk about that's motivation and emotion. As you know, we are born with 5 primary emotions. Some of you watched, is it Inside Out? I think it is, one of the movie, I think it is, that movie. So we have those primary emotions, but we still have to learn where to have those emotions and how much to have those emotions. So consciousness encompasses this umbrella of many areas that we study. Now I'm going to give you a term that's not in your chapter, but I think it will help you to compartmentalize and better define the world of consciousness. So if you're watching this video right now and you're looking at me and you're paying attention, you are in what we would call waking consciousness. Now I know that's not a term in your chapter, but just kind of go with me on this. In waking consciousness, you are conscious. And you think about conscious. You remember when you see a movie and they run up to the person and they say, "How is that person conscious or not?" Meaning, is that person aware? So conscious, to be conscious, means to be aware. And when you think about waking consciousness and to be conscious, to be aware, well, what does that mean? Well, you're aware of time. I mean, when you're awake and you're looking, and some of you look at the time all the time, you're very conscientious of time. Conscious is time. It's people. When you are conscious, you look around for people. You always look for familiar faces. In your everyday world. So conscious, to be aware, is to be aware of time, to be aware of people, to be aware of places. You know where you have to be at certain times, so you have to navigate your world to certain places. So you have to be conscious to do that. I mean, how many times have you been somewhat, we'll talk about the daydreaming, and you miss your turn off because you were thinking about something else. I mean, some of you get to places, like you go home and you pull in the driveway and you have no idea how you got there. So when you are conscious, you are aware of that. So you're aware, again, time, people, and places, but also events that are going on. That helps you to put it in perspective, for your mind to make sense of that information process. All of these things, conscious, to be aware of time, people, places, and events as real. Those are real. Excuse me. So that is waking consciousness. The moment that you shift in that thinking, it becomes an altered state of consciousness. And when we look at an altered state of consciousness, your mind is shifting. Sorry, I was not going to hack, but I'm hacking. So you're in an altered state of consciousness. This chapter in general psychology focuses mainly on sleep, because sleep is very, very important. It's an issue we have in this country. A little bit of daydreaming. We do daydream. And dreams. I mean, dreams are still very prolific. They mean a lot. I have to know them as in clinical psych, because some of our disorders actually have symptomology of nightmares. We'll talk about PTSD, and they have a lot of recurring nightmares. So we have to, in clinical psych, understand what that means. But when you think about an altered state of consciousness, some are natural. And sleep and daydreaming is natural. Yes, you will daydream. It is natural. And the only thing I can say is, be aware of when you're daydreaming. That's important to know, because it's kind of a checking out. It's kind of a mental checking out. So it can be very positive. And of course, sleeping is natural. So when you talk about sleep, and what I want you to understand are the different stages of sleep. Now, the book that we're using here, I'm not sure why she altered the different stages, but according to the Sleep Institute, we still identify 5 stages of sleep. And the more you understand sleep and how the process of sleep works, when you are having difficulty at night, or you're waking up, you have difficulty going to sleep, you have excessive daytime sleepiness, hypersomnia, those kind of red flags. You can think, okay, I know the stages of sleep, so what's going on and where is it going on in stages? A lot of people go to sleep institutes every year to find better sleep. We have a huge problem with insomnia in this country, and they predict that it's going to increase. And again, a lot of stress has some things to do with that. But if you understand how the stages of sleep work, you can stop and think, okay, how is my sleep working out? What is going on? So just to kind of briefly go over it. When you're looking at me and you're watching this video now and you're in waking consciousness, you are producing a brainwave. We can look at your brain waves to know exactly how that process is working. We can use an EEG machine. So when you're looking at me like you're looking and you're paying attention, you are producing a beta wave. But the moment that you relax and your eyes are closed and you kind of just go into that world, even though you can kind of still hear what's going on, my grandmother used to say resting her eyes. If you're Southern, you know what I'm talking about. You can still hear, but the moment that you close your eyes, you go into that mental world and the brain shifts. And now you produce what's called an alpha wave. Now you can stay like that. Some of you have probably just relaxed on the sofa and you're not really completely asleep. You can kind of hear what's going on around you, but you're just kind of in that semi-state. Now during the sleep process, it starts to change just a little bit. So you go to bed and you're lying there and you have your eyes closed. You'd be surprised that things are starting to change within your body. First of all, body temperature does change throughout the night. Some of you know that. You're hot, you're cold, you're hot, you're cold. And when you think about those body changes, your body has to prepare itself for sleep. So it's preparing itself for the next 8 hours, if that's what I hope you're getting. You need more if you're adolescent, by the way. But your body's preparing itself. So if you close your eyes and you're relaxing, you're already shifting that thought. Now, when you think about these stages, just preparing yourself within that first stage, those body changes are taking place. Some of the times you put the covers over because you get chilly. But you can also produce what's called a theta wave as well. So again, we can monitor those waves. If you stay that way and no one bothers you, then with the next 15 or 20 minutes, I'm going to look to see if you're in stage 2 or not. The only way I know if you're in stage 2 is I have to look for those brain changes. And where you see it with the brain is the brain will start going and it'll start slowing down, and then you'll see these like spikes. If you start to see these spikes, those are called sleep spindles. And now we know that you're spindling yourself to sleep. Now you're starting to kind of cross that frontier of sleep, okay? And I'm going to look for that. In about 15 or 20 minutes, I'm going to see whether or not things change. And that's going to tell me that you're moving into stage 3. When you hit stage 3 of sleep, things change. It's an entire new brain wave. It's called delta. And you will see the brain just start to slow down, because now it's starting to go into that world of sleep. Within 15 to 20 minutes, I'm going to see whether or not that changes again. And it's going to be deep. Now, when we refer to deep sleep, you are moving towards that. And the brain is just very, very slow. This is a process. This can take 60 minutes, again, dependent on what's going on during your day. This is a normal pattern. Within about 60 minutes to 90 minutes, I'm going to start seeing whether or not your brain changes. And all of a sudden, your brain is going to become active again. It's going to look like the stage of alpha, even though it's not the first alpha stage, but it's going to start moving like it's an alpha. You're in rapid eye movement. Now you're in REM. And so when you think about the stages of sleep, you go up and down through this process about every 90 minutes. Throughout the night, you are going up and down. So researchers have to ask the question, like, first of all, what is the purpose of REM? How important is it? How long do you stay in REM? And what exactly is going on in that brain that you need that REM? Well, let's answer the first question. When you think about REM and how it works with rapid eye movement, what we do know about what the brain is doing is we're taking chemistry. We can see what's going on in the brain. So we know that during REM, it's brain repair. And so your brain is repairing chemicals, it's repairing neurotransmitters, it's repairing neurons. It's your brain's time to repair itself. Now, again, you call it REM, you call it dreaming, we're calling it REM. And so that REM is important. What we have noticed is there is a time frame that your brain needs about 90 minutes each night in order for it to do what it needs to do. So every night, the brain needs about 90 minutes of REM. And so what that tells us, going up and down, that you go through this process of REM within that 90 minutes about 5 times a night. Now, if you're waking up, it's a different story, okay? Because I know some of you wake up through the night, and your brain will be desperate to kind of get that REM. So what we know is that it's in real time. You dream about 5 times a night, or you're in REM, and it lasts about 90 minutes. It's the time for your brain to repair itself, and that's exactly what's going on. So when you think about that stage, then it's going to go back down again. What's happening in stages 3 and 4, or you want to say technically 2, 3, and 4, they've identified that as non-REM. And about 80 to 90% of the time, you're not dreaming. That's for REM. REM is a dreaming. But it can be a time where you can have visual images. So when you hear about kids having night terrors are in stage 3 and 4. Someone who is somnambulism or sleepwalking, stage 3 and 4. Sleep talking, 3 and 4. So what happens is, and the way I was trying to explain it today, so I'll try to explain it this way. So you're in stage 4, you're in that delta, in that pure delta waves. And I'm going to look to see whether or not, because I can tell when the brain just kicks back in again. It's like it's almost awake. What happens in your brain is that it flips a switch in your brain, and it blocks those neurons that control movement and action. We don't want you running down the street, naked, chasing after Jason Voorhees. We want you in the bed doing it. So what happens is it blocks that. And when you go through that REM and it's time to get back into the next stage, it will flip that switch back and you can move. So some of you may have heard of REM paralysis or sleep paralysis when you're waking up. And sometimes if you wake up natural and you're starting to wake up because you're starting maybe lucid dreaming, you're dreaming, but your brain may not have flipped that switch and your body is thinking, oh no, I can't move. Your brain's going to go, oh, sorry, and then it can flip the switch and you can move. So you can see that you go up and down these stages through the night. What is the importance of REM? Again, it needs it. The way I've explained it today that if you go out, say for instance Friday night, you have a good time with your friends, and you come in late, you get to bed like 3 o'clock, knowing you have to get up at 6. There's no way within that 3 hours that your body went through all those stages every 90 minutes. It didn't get it shot. And so on Friday night, you may owe your brain 20 minutes of REM. Next night you go out, I can do this, you can stay up, you go out a little bit more, you hang out, knowing that you have to be up. And so Saturday night, now your brain goes, okay, now you owe me 30 minutes of REM. Good job. So Sunday night, all of a sudden you have to get to bed because you have to work or go to school the next day. So you get to bed a little bit early. Not only will your brain take its 90 minutes, it will also take 20 minutes from Friday night and 30 minutes from Saturday. So it may feel like you dreamt all night. And that is called REM rebound. And we do study that. So it tells you how important that your body needs that, but also be aware that what happens during the day has a lot to do with the dream content at night. It's a parallel world with what you do during the day at night. Now, Freud was one of the first individuals or theorists to go, you know what, I'll try to figure out what all this dream stuff means. But he was really big into, the unconscious mind and, drives that drive us. And so for Freud and his dream psychodynamic theory, in other words, he says that dreams are the playground for the unconscious mind. You can do whatever you want in dreams. You can fly, you can fall, your teeth can fall out. I know that was thrilling. You can be chased. In fact, there's a lot of chasing dreams. And all that stuff is there. You're in your dream world, your unconscious mind can do anything it wants. I know some of you have, you wake up and you go, ooh, okay. So you can see that our dreams can create people that may not exist. It can take us to far off lands. It's a fairy tale within your mind at night. But it does parallel, according to Freud, that symbology parallels what happens during the day. Now there's another theory called activation synthesis theory, and they believe it has biological components to it, because we're not the only species that dreams. I mean, your dogs dream, you've seen that, your cats, rats, other animals dream. So there has to be some biological component to what's going on. And kind of just to kind of give you a quick synopsis of their theory, is that your body creates this image that your body thinks, we'll do chasing dream. Your body thinks that it's running. It literally thinks that it's running. But when it tries to get messages to the legs, it's not there because, again, it flipped a switch. It can't get the messages. So what happens is, because your brain thinks the body's running, it goes to higher areas in your brain, and it basically creates a chase dream. And so from a biological perspective, it's just the brain's way of making sense of sensory motor information. It integrates and synthesizes this information. Now, there are thinking aspects to it when you look at the cognition and how we practice it, but you're not solving calculus so much in your dreams. You're chasing after the calculus professor. It's very emotional, and we have those dreams. We wake up and we're very upset, we're very angry, we're crying. So you can see that when it pulls to higher levels of thinking, it's pulling that emotional area as well. And REM helps us to process what we did during the day. Some of you, if you had a very stressful day and you're processing information, it will do that. So you think about how sleep works and dream works. That's very, very important. But also too, think about the drug aspect of it, as far as how drugs affect that consciousness and how drugs can alter that consciousness, because drugs are not a natural state of altered consciousness. Drugs are taken there to put us in an altered state. And when you think about how we categorize the drugs, it either depresses the nervous system, which depresses consciousness, it stimulates consciousness, or it alters consciousness when we look at some of our hallucinogens. I'm just kind of looking at my time here. I know I say 10 minutes and then now it's like 20. But it's important stuff. So, we have an issue with drugs already in our country. And for some individuals, drugs alter that brain hardwiring. They tell the brain, you don't have to work at stuff. She'll take something anyway. So drugs have that effect on this and can alter it. The category that, again, can alter the most is your hallucinogenics. That can alter your brain, and it can alter your brain permanently. And when you think about acid, you think about how acid can affect you. I know some of you have heard of acid. It stays in your system, stays in your spinal fluid in residual forms. It can. If you take enough acid and start hallucinating on a permanent basis, I can diagnose you schizophrenia due to drug use. Angel dust is a hardcore drug as well. And believe it or not, I know some of you are not going to like this, but marijuana is a mild hallucinogen. So yes, it does alter your mind. Now, of course, in the depressants, we have opioids, which is the biggest factor that we have now in this country with fentanyl. But again, that depresses the psychological system, and it can act like similar neurotransmitters. So it tells your brain doesn't have to work it hard. You can always tell a true morphine addict because they'll stick it through their tear duct because they want to get it to that parietal lobe as fast as possible. And in your heroin reconstructs your brain. The brain plasticity is hardwired different. As far as stimulants, the most common stimulant, of course, is caffeine. That is the most common stimulant, the world's most used drug. But again, these types of drugs can cause a tolerance, and they can cause withdrawals. Nicotine is second. Nicotine's up there as well. In this area, and we live in the South, we have issues with crystal meth. And you've seen the faces of meth, so you see what this drug does. Some people can take drugs and it doesn't alter their mind. Some people can, and it completely changes it. You never know when your brain gets that drug and those genes turns on, that addictive brain kicks in. So just kind of go back over and look at that. It's important to know the stages of sleep. I hope that helped you out with consciousness. I'm going to bring up drugs again when I get into motivation. I worked chemical dependency for about 2.5 years when I was working on my license, and so I've worked with the hardcore drug addicts that you've seen on like intervention. So I'll bring up that just a little bit more. But I know this was long. I went 10 minutes over, but I hope it was informative, and I hope it can help out. All right, bye.